Hello, welcome back to the Wolf Den. I'm the Wolf, and we're back in reading the Gospels. Now, if you're wondering what happened to my videos on Friday and Saturday, why they took so long to come out, it's because I forgot to hit record when I was doing these. I got so excited when I got to this point where I was reading the gospel for the day, I just jumped right into it and forgot to hit record. I opened the application so that I can, live stream. I'll put my Twitch channel somewhere on screen because I'll live stream it, and the software I use, it's automatically set up to when I go live, it starts recording. So I don't have to think about it. So I opened my application. I can see that my camera was on because I had a little white light. I just wasn't live, so therefore I wasn't recording. But without further ado, let's jump right in. Luke 9. Jesus sends out the 12 apostles. And he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. And he said to them, Take nothing for your journey, no staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics. And whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And wherever they do not receive you, when you leave that town, shake off the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. And they departed and went through the villages, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Herod is perplexed by Jesus. Now Herod, we're back to this word. I still don't know what it is. The Tetrarch. It's not Tesseract, but I don't know what it is. Herod heard all that was happening, and he was perplexed, because it was said by some that John had been raised from the dead, by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the prophets of old had risen. Herod said, John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear such things? And he sought to see him. Jesus feeds the 5,000. On the return, the apostles told him all that they had done, and he took them and withdrew apart to a town called Bethsaida. Excuse me. When the crowd learned it, they followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them of the kingdom of God, and cured those who had need of healing. Now the day began to wear away, and the 12 came and said to him, Send the crowd away to go to the surrounding villages and countryside, to find lodging and get provisions, for we are here in a desolate place. But he said to them, You give them something to eat. They said, We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we are to go and buy food for all these people, about 5,000 men. And he said to his disciples, Have them sit down in groups of about 50 each. And they did so, and he had them, and he, and they did so, and had them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, said a blessing over them, then broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. And they all ate and were satisfied. And what was left over was picked up, 12 baskets of broken pieces. Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ. Now as it happened that he was praying alone, the disciples were with him, and he asked them, Who do the crowd say I am? And they answered, John the Baptist, but others say Elijah, and others that one of the prophets of old had risen. Then he said to them, But who do you say I am? And Peter answered the Christ of God. Jesus foretells his death, and he strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, The Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. Take up your cross and follow Jesus." And he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let them deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed, when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. The Transfiguration. Now about 8 days after saying these, he took with him Peter and John and James, and went up to the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothes became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, when he was about to accomplish what he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep, but but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Not knowing what he said, as he was saying these things, a cloud came over and overshadowed them. And they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud, saying, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent and told no one in those days anything of what they had seen. Jesus heals a boy with an unclean spirit. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. And behold, a man from the crowd cried out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child. And behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out. It convulses him so that he foams at the mouth and shatters him and will hardly leave him. And I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not." Jesus answered, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon threw him to the ground and convulsed him. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the boy and gave him back to his father. And all were astonished at the majesty of God. Jesus again foretells his death. But while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let those words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men." But they did not understand this saying, and it was concealed from them, so that they may not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask him about this saying. Who is the greatest? An argument arose among them as to which of them was the greatest. But Jesus, knowing the reasoning of their hearts, took a child and put him by his side, and said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you is all who is great. Anyone not against us is for us." John answered, "Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he does not follow with us." But Jesus said to him, "Do not stop him, for," I don't know why this keeps happening. This was not happening before I started recording. But Jesus said to him, "Do not stop him, for the one who is not against you is for you." A Samaritan village rejects Jesus. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him who went and entered the village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But the people did not receive him because his face was set towards Jerusalem. And when his disciples James and John saw it, they said, "Lord, do you not want us to tell fire to come?" Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? but he but he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. The cost of following Jesus. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds have air. Sorry. Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." To another he said, "Follow me." But he said, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." And Jesus said, "Leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Yet another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but but let me first say farewell to those at my home." Jesus said to him, "No one who puts his hands to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." So, couple things I wanted to talk about. So, if you're unaware, like I was for a long time, I did not know this. The Jesus's disciples, the commonly referred to as the 12, they are teenagers. They're not full-grown adults. The oldest one is Peter, and that's just by context. He's at minimum 18. Um, the rest are younger than that. Just because that was Jewish tradition for when a rabbi took on disciples, they were young kids that spent their entire life with not with the disciple, with the rabbi, hearing and listening to him, so that when they hit 30, they became rabbis, and then they took on disciples, and so on and so forth. So, which puts into perspective a lot of like what goes on. For example, who is the greatest? So this one has a little less context than the other the other gospels. And basically, this argument, the disciples are asking who is the greatest, who would be like the greatest in the kingdom of God, like who is the best disciple. And Jesus had to put aside that he was like, humble yourself. It's interesting because when he says, whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. Because children, so in Jewish society, it's like men, women, children, I think. Or it might be men, children, women. No, because he says the child is the least. So yeah, it's like men, women, children until they hit certain age, and then they're all right. Um, so it's like this child. So what Jesus is saying is like this child has no place in Jewish society. He's not the greatest. He has no rights, no nothing. And Jesus is like, to get into the kingdom of God, you have to be like this. Receive the child like this. So that's like why their argument was going on. Also, it explains a lot of the time when like they see, for example, anyone not against us is for us, where it's like, hey, we saw somebody casting out demons in your name and we tried to stop them, and because they're not with us, they're not in the club, they don't have the cool jacket, you know. And Jesus is like, don't stop them, because they're not against you, they're for you. Like, leave them alone, which also makes sense because they're kids. And then this one, I hadn't heard this story before, so that I do like this. I do find it interesting, where Jesus goes into the Samaritan village and he's like, whoops, that's this one, not that one. And he's like, okay, I want to stay here. And then the Samaritans are like, no, you can't. And then James and John were like, how about you call fire down and consume them? Well, I don't know. I was going to say, like, as a well adjusted 30-year-old, you may not say that. I'm going to go ahead and say you wouldn't say that. But as like a 13-year-old where it's like, hey, this is my rabbi. Why aren't you letting him in? We know he has power. Peter even calls him the Christ of God. And they're like, hey, let him stay. No. All right. Well, Jesus, why don't you set them on fire? And he's like, oh gosh, come on, kids. No. Um, oh, yes. And that is one of the things I wanted to touch upon right here. Jesus feeds the 5,000. Now, that's already impressive, right? We can, okay, cool. He did a miracle where he fed 5,000 people, and he only had, what was it, 5 loaves of bread and like 2 fish. It gets more impressive when you take into account what I just said about the Jewish hierarchy of women and children. They wouldn't have been counted. They would have counted the men, right? So they would have said, okay, there's 5,000 men, essentially. So the women and children weren't counted. So it's likely Jesus fed a lot more than that, assuming one man and his wife, and then like 1 to 2 kids, maybe more, right? So that's just like where the 5,000 number comes from is the men. So that's just like, but anyways, I think that is all today. If there's something that I didn't answer or that you had a question, sorry, not that I didn't answer, something I didn't talk about, and you have a question on it, leave it in the comments. If I know the answer, I'll write back to you. If I don't know it, I will find out. I will take your question, go to my pastor, ask him, and then I will put his response in there. Excuse me. So yeah, if you have any questions, um, feel free to put them in the comments below, and we will get them answered. But um, that's all today. So I am the Wolf, and I look forward to howling with you again next time.